Standing up in McKinney, this is, according to Callis, the delayed episode 619, a Monday update, if you will. Before we go any further, let me just let you know I'm not going anywhere. My numbers look a little odd, a little shadow ban action, I think, in the last couple weeks here. But contrary to what you may have heard or seen, I'm not quitting, not going anywhere. Probably not even going to slow down. I think I got out 5 episodes last week, even though I missed a day. So what do I want you to know? Join me to find out. But before you do that, take this time right now. Like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends. Join me on the social media. I've got a page and a group over at Facebook. I am a pro at Gab, and yes, I still drop in at MeWe, and for the foreseeable future, my stuff will still be at YouTube. One of the drawbacks, if you will, to keeping your show focused largely on local topics and not really going too far out of Texas issues is your numbers. They don't work in your favor. They just don't. If I were to do a national show, I could probably have 10 times the listeners. But I don't think I'd be doing anybody a favor. So I devoted probably one day a week to talk about national issues, but at the local response, if you will, or the Texas impact. But as we roll into the national elections, I'm going to have to pivot just a little bit to deal with those issues. So keep that in mind as we go on. In addition to that, I had a Civil War week planned, i.e. for the Civil War movie, not the event in the past, because I think this is important. I think there's a lot that could be said about this. I am going to devote Wednesday's episode to a full breakdown, synopsis of the film, and my thoughts related to it. I've listened to a number of reviews. I will be watching the movie more than once probably by then. And so I think I'm going to have a couple of odds and ends that you haven't heard before. I'm going to try and relate it to things in Texas because that's what I do. All right. So here we go on with the program. First things first, let's get it right off and out, off my chest, out the door. So the Republican Party of Collin County has decided to endorse 11 candidates of, I guess, 15 to 20 that actually requested it. I've always been very hesitant on endorsements from the county party in municipal races. I see an advantage if it's done right, if it's done with a thought out policy and action in place. What we're doing now is not that. What we're doing now is largely based on what a number of people think and want. And unfortunately, the executive committee has not saw fit to reconsider the process that's in place, nor change it, nor stop it. And I'm bound by what the executive committee wants to do. I cannot override that, nor do I want to. However, what I do as an individual, even as a precinct chair, is based solely on what I think and what I know. So in that regard, in that thought process, I'm only going to endorse 3 people in the municipal races. They're the 3 Daves. They're all in Allen. Now, and this is why I want to lay this out like this. I don't know anything about what goes on in Wiley. I don't know anything about what goes on in Princeton. I don't know anything about what goes on in Anna, Melissa, Prosper, Salina. Those are all cities outside of my sphere of interaction or regular visits. So I find it very difficult to make an educated decision on what's best for a candidate in those cities. I know enough about my neighboring Allen, my neighboring Frisco, and I guess to a degree, my neighboring Plano, because they're part of the big four like McKinney is that I can make an educated decision most of the time. Sometimes I look into things and I don't have all the information, and I get additional emails or texts or private messages that fill me in on things that I didn't already know. And I find that very helpful. And I talk to a lot of different people. And I have a very strong invested interest in protecting and maintaining the positive things that are going on in the big four. So when I say that, that's where I'm coming from. So I know the three Daves, right? That's Dave Scott, Dave Schaefer, Dave Cornett. All three Daves have done an interview with me. All three Daves I've met multiple times. And I can say with some level of confidence, which is a high level of confidence, that they're the right people to continue to serve in Allen. You have big shoes to fill in the absence of Darren Mice. I think Dave Scott's the right guy for that job. Now, one of the things that's unique when you're dealing with municipal government is you're supposed to set your party ideology or your party politics aside and work with what's going on in the city. Now, I have seen that play out quite well via Dave Cornett and Dave Schaefer. They are still ideologically, politically right by any measure, but they have worked with the city. They've come together to come up with compromises and good policies that they can all live with. And even if they vote against it, they understand that that was what the majority wanted, and they accept it and they move on. And they're trying to work to make things nicer, better, more cost efficient, and quite frankly, keep good protections for the city. Police, fire. All three spoke about the importance of first responders. So when I say that, that does not mean that I think the other candidates are terrible, although a couple of them look iffy. That does not mean I have anything to say negative about either their opponents or the people they're running against. It's not that at all. We have two incumbents who have proven their worth, and we have a third person that's running in the open seat, should be held in equal standing with the other gentleman that's running. And again, I don't have to talk trash about any of the other candidates. I will just say all three of these guys impressed me in their own way to where I'm comfortable endorsing them. Now, I don't live in the city of Allen, but to be honest, I'm about 1.5 miles from the Allen city border. I spend a lot of time with both work and pleasure going to Allen. I like Allen. I want Allen to continue doing what they've been doing. They have good, solid leadership, and I'd like them to see that way. If they should lose these three races, I have a feeling that the tenor of Allen will change. Now, is it going to go off the rails? No. Is it going to be crazy leftist progressive city? No, probably not. But you want to keep it on an even keel, and you want a balanced city council. When you get an unbalanced city council, you get Dallas. When you get a city council that goes off the rails, you get Austin. We don't want those things to happen. Yes, demographics change. Yes, cities grow. They become more mature. They get different things that are unique about them. We all understand that. But we as good conservatives, we as good Republicans, however you want to phrase that, we have to do a good job of running the city that we run. And we have to hold it up as a comparison to the cities left, or that the left runs. The progressives damage cities long term. And we need to be willing to point it out and show up that look at what we're doing in regards to what you're doing. Which city is in a better situation? So in that case, I think I've made it clear. I don't need to make their arguments. There's 3 interviews that are up since last week, Friday to the Friday before. 3 interviews, 7 days. Check them out. I hope you'll come away with the same opinion. Meanwhile, we have the runoffs, which, again, we're coming to the end of this. And I've already endorsed Shelby Williams. I think he's by far the better candidate. Does that mean I dislike the other candidate? No. Does that mean that I think that the other candidate's a terrible person? No. I've already talked about my misgivings. I'm not going to repeat them now. But I do want to reiterate that notwithstanding my difference of opinion on the Convention of States with Shelby, We've agreed to disagree a long, long time ago. I don't let that interfere with anything else that we work on together. We both want to see the same things, which is keeping Calhoun County more conservative, more pro-liberty. That necessitates Republicans winning offices from the school boards and the city councils up through the statewide races. We can't do that if we continue to ignore the lower races. We can't do that if we run candidates that aren't capable of winning those municipal races, whether it's school board or city council. Now, you can read into that whatever you want, but Shelby is a proven winner, and he knows how things get done. And if you can't see that and you can't accept that and you'd rather name call, then I have nothing else further to say to you. But you folks out there that may be undecided, you folks out there that see his opponent and think highly, by all means, continue to do that. But I'm not confident that that person's ready for the job. That's my opinion. I stand by it. You can feel free to contradict me, but I'm not going to talk smack. I'm not going to call names. I'm just going to say, by far, Shelby Williams, in my opinion, is the better candidate. So I'm going to support Shelby Williams, and I think you ought to as well. That's for the Calhoun County GOP chairmanship. All right. Now I've got a little bit of a change of pace here. And I got to say, this is difficult in one regard. And I guess I'm relieved in another. HD 61, I made a calculated choice, kind of the devil I knew versus the devil I didn't. I was an early Jim Herblin supporter in the original race 2 years ago. He did not make the runoff. I made the decision that I thought that my former city councilman was a better choice given what I knew. Turns out that not necessarily that I get it wrong, but I certainly didn't bargain with what all happened. Sadly, that what I thought was a mere distraction, what I thought was going to be not much of anything, has turned into a lot more than that. And I'm disappointed, and I felt like I was being misled. I understand some of it in the heat of the campaign. You make mistakes. I understand that people sometimes overstep or cross a line, but I don't expect in a personal conversation that you're going to not get the truth. So that's a challenge for me to overlook that at this point. But on the onset, I was very clear that I would rather stick with something that I know, even though it's not perfect, even though it's not my ideal, over two unknowns. Well, I can say with some level of certainty that Carissa has proven herself in running a pretty tight campaign based upon all volunteers, based upon what she's been able to pull off in the primary and getting to the runoff. And I don't know what the outcome would have been if it would have been a two-person race. Can't re-litigate that, if you will. But what I do know is she outperformed anything that I expected. I've had an opportunity to go and talk with her. I'm hoping maybe I can get an interview with her before we get to the actual runoff election, if for no other reason, so that you out in the audience can hear from her firsthand. So I never officially endorsed her opponent, but I never endorsed her. So at this point, I'm going to say my recommendation for sticking with what you had has now been pulled. And I think I'm going to hold that recommendation for just another day or two to make sure that I want to switch from one horse to the other. And it's difficult. It's a challenge. I mean, it's not something you do lightly. You have to consider what are the ramifications. Because I got to be honest, I don't want to burn that bridge. If the incumbent wins and I've quote unquote flipped on him, I mean, whatever bridge is there is now gone. And I think my value to our community, my value to Calhoun County Republican Party is I've kept that bridge open when a whole lot of other people in this House district burned it. And they burned it a long time ago. And I don't subscribe to that idea. That being said, that's the update on the runoffs. All right. Now we've got some issues with the home team as we're approaching the halfway mark on this episode here. I don't want to get into too many details. Unfortunately, the situation that I described last week has proven to be unnecessarily dramatic. We'll just go with that. It's going to be dealt with. It will be dealt with. And I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I can't. I have other things to do. Besides my day job and my political ambition, or work, perhaps be the better way to phrase it, and this podcast, I have a family and I have a life to deal with outside of all of that. And I just can't spare the bandwidth for drama. But I want to take a moment and revisit some of the underlying issues that we have with the home team. I want to say on the onset that I believe the majority of these folks actually want to do what they think is the right thing. They want to get, recruit, and elect the best, most conservative candidates they can find. And while that is a noble cause, you have to have a little savoir-faire, maybe. Sorry, I had to. There's got to be some strategy. There's got to be some long-term thought. There's got to be a determination on what's doable, what's legitimate, what is accomplishable at this time. You can't set unrealistic goals multiple times, continue to fail and then consider that people are going to not hold you in contempt. You can't damage yourself to such the extent that you have no value. Which is one of the reasons why I like to, or I've learned the lesson, if you will, of holding off on endorsements, holding off on getting involved in, vouching for people. I think that I question, I don't want to say the motivations, but the wisdom of some of the folks that are pushing for endorsing in races and some of the people that they choose. I think I wouldn't call it a stunning lack of wisdom, but I would say an immature wisdom. I can respect what they're trying to accomplish. I just don't think that they've thought it all the way through. I do appreciate the fact that we dialed it back. We didn't feel the need to go and endorse in every race this time around. That would have been a disaster. I don't know all the details. I'm trying to stay in my lane, if you will, which I both respect and dislike that phrase and that thought process all at the same time. You can't be an expert in everything. You can't know everything about everything, which is what I outlined earlier. I can maybe have some thoughts on the big four because I interact in them quite often. I have a lot of contacts in those cities. And I'm more willing to stick my neck out, if you will, in that situation. But I'm not doing anybody any favors if I go wading off into something that I don't understand or I don't have enough details to make a decision. I mean, it's real easy for me to weigh in on the SD30 race, right? You got Brent Hagenbaugh, who apparently now has more legitimate endorsements. Sadly, they were probably bought and paid for, but he has better people endorsing him than what I'm comfortable with. But at the end of the day, clearly the guy doesn't even live in the district that he wants to represent. Clearly the guy's a serial liar. Clearly the county party that he used to run wants no part of him. Now, that's dangerous territory to go down since our own county party, a good number of them felt the need to go after Abraham George. But it wasn't the whole party. It was just a small section that decided to cut their nose off to spite their face. And of course, these are the same folks that then turn around and are telling us who the better candidates are to run for office. Now, if you can't see the lack of wisdom there, if you can't see the lack of maturity there, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, it's clear as day that nobody in leadership or that has worked hard for the party in Denton County is happy with the idea of Brent Hagenbaugh running for SD30 when he lives in SD12. But apparently nobody at the state level really cares. Nobody is going to do anything to stop it. The only option you have is to vote for what I think is a better candidate anyway, J.C. Yarbrough. But you had two other choices besides, and I would say those two other choices were still better than Brent Hagenbaugh. But here we are. You got your choice between Hagen-Fraud and, Hagen-Baugh, excuse me. Gotta watch those slips there. And Yarborough. And it should be a very easy decision for the grassroots. The problem is that a good chunk of the establishment, and indeed some of the good quality liberty leadership that we have, decided to weigh in on something that apparently they don't know enough about. And look, all you MAGA guys out there, you do know Trump makes mistakes, right? He trusts sometimes the wrong people. He's got a track record of doing that, unfortunately. Now, yes, we all like him. He's so much better than Sleepy Creepy Joe. But are you really, really going to depend on the President of the United States that's probably visited Texas less times than I've lived here, which is 27, by the way. And as good a guy as he may be, I think he's getting bad intel, bad information. That's just me. So when I say that, this directly translates to some of the decisions, some of the choices that were made in Collin County. On the behalf of the Collin County Republican Party, there were a number of nominations or recommendations that were given, and nobody really questioned it. We got the same story about, well, we vetted these folks and we've listened to them, and some of them are clearly not ready. Well, I'm flabbergasted that you would even consider somebody that wasn't ready, but I guess in due diligence, you have to at least hear them out. Okay, that's a given. And I'm glad that we dialed back on feeling the need to endorse in every single race, since that clearly was demonstrated not once but twice to be a bad idea. But I wonder, what was the criteria? Because keep in mind, I know who a good number of these individuals are that served on this committee, and I think it'd be fair to say that they lack wisdom. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying they're evil. I'm not going to call them names like they've resorted to doing to other people. I'm not going to dismiss them as not being Republicans. I won't even call them Democrats like some have. I will just say they have lacked wisdom, and they've shown that. They've demonstrated it. So I'm not super comfortable with their decisions that they put forth, but guess what? The Collin County GOP already voted that this is what we're going to do. So rather than argue that, rather than relitigate that, rather than continue to fight that, I accept what is. I've spoken on the 3 candidates that I thought are worthy of my endorsement from the municipal level. I sincerely hope that the 2 incumbents win their re-election by a nice margin, and that they bring along the 3rd guy that I think is worthy of the time there. But unfortunately, what's going to happen is that a certain segment is going to fight, and they're going to dismiss, and they're going to drag down, and they're going to, quite frankly, abandon the very people that we want to be running because there's some difference of opinion, or there's some minor fault that they don't want to overlook. And my answer is always, is this person better than the other option? Is this an improvement of what the other person was before them? If that's the case, then yeah, okay, you hold their feet to the fire. You let them know you're not happy about the decision or the position or whatever, but you still got to support them. That doesn't mean that any of those Daves are perfect. It doesn't mean that I agree with all 3 of them absolutely, because they don't all agree with each other absolutely. It's a certain amount of trust and relationship that you know they're going to do the best they can with the information that they get, and that they have enough wisdom to determine what's the good idea, what's best for the city of Allen, and how can we work together to do this. But again, this is where wisdom matters. This is where taking a little strategy matters. But it's my sincere hope that cooler heads prevail, that we continue to both streamline the process, but make it a more careful, thought out process, right? It shouldn't take 15 hours of debate to determine if one candidate is qualified and better than the other. What it should take is a little more background information. It should take a little bit more local observation or interaction. That would be my choice. And again, I have to take it on faith. And that's where the problem is. I've lost a lot of faith in the folks that are allegedly doing all this stuff. I'm not saying that they're not. I just don't know that I agree with what they're doing and how they're doing it. That's what's scary, because they're speaking and doing all that work on behalf of you and me and anybody else that calls themselves, that serves as a precinct chair or calls themselves a good Republican. So at this point, all we have is set it aside, support the better candidates, get the voters out, and trust that we made the right decisions, that we're going to have a winning record this time around. And then we just focus on state, right? It's on the state. We have the state convention a little over a month. There's a whole lot of things that are going to be going on there. And I'm happy and pleased to announce that once again, I'm going to be serving SD8 on the state platform committee. I will be down there for an entire week. And I would encourage you, if you have something particularly important that you want to be heard on, or that you desire to give your input, come down and pay us a visit. We'll be there Monday through Wednesday doing nothing but doing hearings, whether in committee or subcommittee, and talking about how can we do a better job with the platform, how can we better articulate what the values and the principles are of the Republican Party. That's where you come in. This is your chance that you can be heard at the state level. I'm not saying you're going to be able to change the outcome, but you will be able to be heard, and you will be able to advocate strongly for your issue or issues that are most concerning to you. The state convention is ultimately the best, most important tool that we have as part of the Republican Party to get our stuff done. The next thing being the state Republican Executive Committee. And we're going to vote on who our next 2 years are going, or we're going to vote on who is going to represent us in the next 2 years at the State Republican Executive Committee. As of right now, Maggie Witt is running for re-election as our committee lady. She has not drawn an opponent. Now this is where it gets interesting. My friend Jim Pickle, who I think has done a great job representing us and has pushed to get us a Rule 46, and if you don't know what that is, it has to do with closed primaries, which is highly important, is pivotal in the future of Texas, and he's working on that right now. He's been instrumental in doing a lot of improvements to Rule 44, which again, if you don't know what that means holding our elected officials accountable. He's going to be facing a challenger. Now, I would say if we had had this conversation about 3 years ago, I would have had a much higher opinion of the person that is challenging him. Over the last 3 years, I'll just say that it's some of the shine is off that coin. I'm not going to talk trash. I'm not going to say he's a bad guy, but I'm going to say that Jim Pickle's superior. I'm going to say that Jim Pickle does a very good job of advocating on behalf of Senate District 8, and I think we should give him another full term. I think he has done a stellar job at the state level of doing the things that matter and standing for good conservative, liberty-based principles. Now, I know there's a whole lot of people out there that were upset because he didn't rubber stamp an endorsement 2 years ago. Okay, that's fine. Feel free to feel that way, to be upset, disappointed, whatever. But I will just say that he had every right to do that. And that was well within his sphere of authority. And to me, it's shocking to me that they wanted to basically try and fire this guy who represents all of SD8 because he didn't give a rubber stamp to some candidates in the municipal races that, quite frankly, were running against other Republicans. Now, I'm going to ask you, does that show wisdom? Do the people that were upset show more wisdom than the guy that said, yeah, you know what, this is probably not a good idea. I'm going to put a hold on this stuff. I'm going to take a little more time and look into it. Now, you can disagree with him. You can say that you would have done something differently, but I'm going to ask you which side showed more wisdom. To me, hands down, it's Jim Pickle and his not wanting to just rubber stamp something and wanting to look further into it because he's looking out for the Republican Party's name, the Republican Party's reputation, over and above a couple of municipal races in Collin County, Texas. Big picture, folks. Big picture. So yeah, if you're going to go down to the state convention and you're going to be at the SD8 convention at the state convention, the caucus for SD 8, if you will, I would highly encourage you to support Jim Pickle for re-election. That's the best choice we have. Again, nobody is perfect. I'm not even perfect. Shock, I know. I say that half-heartedly, right? When you talk about perfect, it's perfect in your own mind, right? What is it that perfectly lines up with what I think? All right, last thing. I know I'm going to go over time here, but just bear with me for 3 minutes here. I think the underlying problem is people are fighting for what they find important. They're fighting for what they want to protect. Some of those folks are horribly misled, leftist progressives, right? Some of them have the wrong enemies, the people in our own camp, right? They spend a lot of time going after people that they already agree with and are on the same team, but they're so interested in the purity, they're so interested in the perfection that they're actually working against their own positive outcomes. This is the underlying problem, right? When you've seen the trailers for Civil War, when you even think about it, the idea that they can remember what it is they're fighting over or what they're fighting for gets lost. And I think that's perhaps where we're getting to already. People are forgetting what's important and just remembering, I don't like this person. I don't like what this person did, said, or believes, so they're my enemy. They're the problem. And then it returns back that I don't really know what their problem is, but they're trying to kill me, so I'm going to try to kill them. And we're talking metaphorically here, folks. Just keep that in mind. I remember when I was a little kid, you used to hear about the Hatfields and the McCoys and being in West Virginia or Kentucky, and most people believe that was an outcome of the Civil War, right? The War of Northern Aggression, if you will. The War of Southern Secession. Whatever you want to call it. When they investigated, because it had been going on for so long, they actually didn't even really know what caused it or started it. And at least hypothetically, right, the myth goes that it was over a pig. A blood feud. And if we can't keep things clear, if we don't understand what motivates people or what the differences are or what's important, legitimately important, I fear that we're going to go down the same path. And as I've said again and again and again, you don't want to go there. You don't want this outcome. Yeah, it sounds great. We're going to put the feds in their place. Yeah, it sounds great. We're going to dial back the abuses out of DC. But at what cost? Will you be successful? Will the outcome be worse than what we have now? I don't know any of that. I don't know that I even feel confident to speculate. I do know that if Texas goes independent, if Texas were to peacefully move on and become their own republic again, I feel pretty secure in the knowledge that that could be done in an appropriate way, then be done peacefully. But that would require that the feds won't have the same reaction they did when South Carolina tried to do the same thing. And hopefully cooler heads will prevail. Hopefully there will be a lot more wisdom now that we've lived through one before, even though it is 150 years in the rearview mirror and people, quote unquote, don't remember what was going on there. We need to. 160 years later, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with and whether or not it's really worth the cost. Civil War is probably not a good answer. Civil War is probably never going to be a good answer. Peaceful secession, reestablishment of a friendly country on the border with you, yeah, that sounds great. I want to see it happen. I think it can happen. Unfortunately, there's a whole lot of people out there that would rather blow it all up than see somebody go their own way. There's a whole lot of Yankees out there that can't live with the idea that somebody might be doing something that they don't approve of. And with that, remember, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. This has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.